What is up, everybody? Welcome to Destination the Show. This is episode 50, recording on the evening of September 11th, 2024. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined by Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, we have been really inconsistent. Haven't seen that much of you recently, which is a little unusual. How are you, man? How's things? I know you've been busy. What's going on with you, dude?
And so nobody's really seen me unless you're in need of a bus or a van. My family hasn't seen me. So the beginning of the school year has been fun. Um, haven't been watching the Twins lose except for I went to Monday's was it Monday? Monday's game and sat in the center field like lounge suite area.
Ooh, how was it?
Um,
How's the spread? I bet there's good food.
it was the best.
Okay.
So they're like $96 tickets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my brother and I roll in and we're like, free food, free drink.
Yep.
Um, and they serve it to you. So you don't even like have to, they just come and they're like, oh, we need another beer. Um, but the
That's
food
all
was,
wrapped up as part of the ticket.
yeah, yeah. So the spread was some fancy salad that I passed on. Um, dinner rolls, which I ate a number of. Sweet potato, like little potatoes. Had a bunch of those.
Okay.
Lobster ravioli, which
Ooh, yum.
I think I ate about 3 pounds of it.
Sure.
Like I kept coming back for more, and I'm like, this stuff's really good. And the lady's like, yeah. And prime rib.
Mm.
So
I bet you got your money's worth.
I did. I also felt it the next day, but I'm like, I don't even, Twins lost to the Angels, whatever. I ate 3 pounds of lobster ravioli and two giant hunks of prime rib. I didn't
Nice.
even want to drink the beer. I figured the prime rib was more worth it. So, but that was fun. Like, and I think, you take your wife on a date and you go to eat and you go to a Twins game, you're paying way more
Yep.
than that anyway. So yeah, that was
For sure,
that
man.
was the first time I've ever experienced that. I've done everything else I think at Target Field worth
Mm-hmm.
doing. So that was kind of the last thing, and they lost, but they also had like iPads up there that we turned the one on in front of us to watch the Monday Night Football game too. So
Nice.
there was plenty of stuff. But yeah, that's been the only fun thing I've done in like a month and a half. Um, that's actually not true. We went to the Green Day Smashing Pumpkins concert at Target
Oh,
Field.
look at you. Look at you. You're holding out on me, man. You're making
Those
out like your life
are
has been so difficult recently, and here you are swanning around in the Target field, Center Field suites, and
those are the only two things I've done outside of my house for
fair
work.
enough.
So yeah, that's my life anyway. How are you?
Dude, I mean, same, just like a slightly less hectic version of yours. We both work in education, and so beginning of the school year is always kind of brutal, no matter what role you occupy in that. And so that's really the reason that we have been pretty inconsistent over the past few weeks. But I'm excited to get back in a groove here with you, and I think we're going to be able to put together a good run here with minimal interruptions here. So I'm excited to kind of dig in because we're really coming up on the end of the minor league season. Before we jump into that, a couple of housekeeping things. Um, I do gotta mention this real quick. There's a new place at which you can find my ramblings. So if folks are interested, I know we're really not in draft season at all at the moment, but I'm doing some additional writing work at Prospects Live, which is it's awesome. Great opportunity for me to keep up to date with the draft stuff and with the guys who were just drafted and how they're doing in the minor leagues. So if draft is your thing and you want to stay up to speed, you'll find my first piece up there at Prospects Live, which is about some of the top bets in the first round of the 2024 cycle and how they've done so far. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and it just makes sense for you to do something that gets eyes on it from more than just a specific team perspective, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the draft is a national thing. You prep for it for the whole league, and then the draft happens, and we don't cover 90% of the
Right.
league. and care less about some of the other ones that we do. And so, I mean, it just makes sense that it's like you have the knowledge, you have the data. Why not write it for eyes that would find it relevant? So it's like we were just talking about that off before we recorded. Like Charlie Condon, not great.
Not often. A lot of first round hitters are not doing that well. And I'm interested because I think there's a couple of guys in the Twins system that we're going to talk about today that might fall under that kind of bracket or bucket of like worn down, right? I caught the last like 3 minutes of the Twins game where Royce Lewis hit a kind of wall scraping double, thought it was a grand slam. He just looks worn down. He just looks exhausted. I feel like that's true for a number of Twins hitters, and I think it's certainly true for college guys who are transitioning to professional baseball for the first time. But hoping to be back on consistently on Wednesdays now. Thank you guys for your patience. Some ways that you can support the show. You can find us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. We have an email also if you want to send us questions for the show. Love getting those. That's destinationtheshow@gmail.com. You can find all of our videos and episodes on YouTube. The handle is at Destination the Show. Anything you can do to support the show, whether that is downloading episodes, liking, subscribing, following it on your podcast platform of choice, is truly appreciated. So I am excited though, Jeremy. I know we have not recorded or spent a ton of time kind of bantering about baseball in the last couple of weeks here, but we're going to do like a mega end of season Twins farm review. And we kind of started this like 3 weeks ago, but honestly, so much has happened since then that it's honestly worth starting over. So here's what we're going to do. Over roughly like the next like 6 weeks, because we got some guests coming up too, that I'm hoping to drop. I'm gonna tease that for the end of the episode, but we have a guest coming up next week. Over the next like 6 weeks, we're gonna do 5 Twins prospects at a time, starting from the top of the system and working our way kind of to the bottom from like 1 to 20, 1 to 30. We'll see how far we get. And we're going to do kind of an overview of their year because the Twins farm system overall had a really strong year, ranked like top 3, top 5 by a number of industry publications at this point. And so we want to dig into all of that. So for each guy, we'll do like, here's just kind of a couple of sentences on their year. Here's some numbers. And then I'm going to hit you with, hopefully, the difficult and searching questions to get your takes on like, has their year been good, bad, what you expected, what you didn't expect? What do you think? And how does this situate them for next year, and so on and so forth. So today we're starting at the top. So we're going to do Walker Jenkins, Manuel Rodriguez, Brooks Lee, Luke Keaschall, Zebby Matthews, and David Festa. We're going to roll through those guys and see how far we get. Should be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Ready to dig in?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So let's start with the top of the system. Walker Jenkins started the year with a hamstring strain he sustained, I think, after 1 at bat. He missed 6 weeks, got off to a slow start at Fort Myers, heated up. Then he was promoted to Cedar Rapids. He absolutely demolished High A. And he's been promoted again, Jeremy, to Wichita, to Double A. 19-year-old Walker Jenkins up to Double A for the final 6 games of the season. I believe they're playing the second of those, that final homestand tonight. Numbers on the season: 282, 393, 448. That's good for 841 OPS. He is walking 15% of the time, more than he is striking out 13.5% of the time. Bat to ball skills are insane. 83% contact rate, only a 9% end zone whiff, and a 352 expected WOBA. What's your reaction to Walker Jenkins being promoted to Double A this late in the season? Is it significant in your opinion?
I don't know that that's the right word. I think it's super cool. I'm glad the Twins did it. The one season's over and it gives him an opportunity to see a little bit more advanced pitching before the offseason. The other thing that You and I text about, or actually, I think maybe it was on Twitter, was talking about AFL and how
Mm-hmm.
the Twins use that. And I would guess that they're not gonna send Walker Jenkins there. They're not gonna send a lot of these guys there. But just to give him kind of a head start on the league, like this is where he's gonna start 2025.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you give him a half dozen game cameo to see? But yeah, I think it's just a vote of confidence. Like we're gonna do this. Um, are we gonna talk about his prospect ranking overall yet, or do you want me to bring that up?
So I actually want to hold off on that
Okay.
until we talk about Erod 2, because Cody Christie from Twin Saley asked a really interesting question that I think ties all of that together kind of in a bow. But let me ask you a couple more questions about Jenkins, because I agree wholeheartedly, and I think what this has done is it has shed light on, like, okay, we sure know what the plan is for 2025 now. It's
Right.
you're starting in Double A. Hopefully you hit the ground running, because he absolutely dominated high A. So I guess my question for you is, early this season when he was out 6 weeks with a hamstring strain, I think most folks logically would have put his timetable for a potential major league debut at 2026, right? Because he hadn't even really got started at low A, and it was like mid to late May already. Do you think him starting at Double A next year gives him a chance to see a big league debut in 2025?
Yeah, I do, and I wish that there was someone that would have recorded the time where I made some predictions earlier, because I feel like I said best case scenario he ends this year at Double A, and then puts himself in a position to make his big league debut later in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at the time super aggressive. But I think whoever it is, whenever you reach Double A, you're pretty much on the map where you could be promoted to the big leagues, because it's not unheard of to go from Double A to skip Triple A right to the big leagues. I think you see that less now, um, with the reduced teams. I don't have anything to prove that, but um, I do think that as soon as the season starts, there's going to be a microscope, right? And so I think that it's realistic that he makes his debut next summer.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, let's talk about him when we talk about Erod. I think that that's also kind of how that weighs with each other. So different, but kind of the same. Like Kirilloff and Larnach were kind of redundant, um, and Jenkins and Rodriguez kind of fit differently. Um, I view them as different positions. One is as a center fielder, one is a corner guy.
Mm-hmm.
And with Larnach and Kirilloff, they were kind of the same, but it was like you knew one of them was going to get the opportunity first, and it was just kind of a matter of who was healthy and who was playing okay. But I certainly think that both of those guys fit in the long term plans. I also think that there's some question marks right now in the corner of the Twins outfield.
Yep.
There's a
Yep.
question in
Push.
the middle of the Twins outfield. All that I think we can confidently say for next year is that Matt Wallner is going to be playing right field, right?
Oh, dude, Matt Wallner has been an absolute revelation since he
Was terrible.
got his glow up at St. Paul at the beginning of the season. I'm so impressed. I think it was Bobby Nightingale from the Star Trib tweeted tonight after he hit his game-tying home run in the first inning. He has an OPS north of 1,000 since he's been back with the Twins, which is now a significant chunk of time. I mean, he's really positioned himself as a legitimate long-term contributor,
Right.
albeit maybe one who is a little bit high variance. Okay, we will come back to Walker Jenkins' overall prospect ranking, but I also want to ask you this question after we kind of tie a bow for each guy. Walker Jenkins, based on everything we know from this year, right? So his numbers, got to Double A, still 19, all that good stuff. Stock up, stock down, or stock neutral for you?
I'd say slightly up.
Dang,
And I
wow.
say slightly because prospects are going to graduate. It's always going to happen. So when you really see like stock up, that's when you jump like 30, you jump over like 30 dudes and don't just jump up to the top because of graduation. And
I see what you're saying.
he's moved up. Obviously, he didn't have 30 spots to jump, but
Right.
it's not like he jumped over a bunch of guys.
I see what you're saying.
He's kind of held his ground and moved up. Um, I think that's a lot tougher to do when you're up at the very, very top.
Yeah. So
So
I guess I interpreted that question right as like his performance as opposed to his ranking, which, as you say, is influenced a little bit by context. And for
right,
me, it was like you checked the box of when you finally got back on the field, you crushed low A, you actually got better at high A, and you got to double A in your age 19 season. That feels like stock up to me. Although, to your point, he hasn't
his
risen
stock
a
was already
ton.
up.
Sure, sure. Fair enough. Fair enough. High expectations. Okay, let's move on because we still got 5 more guys to get through. Erod, finally. Dude, after the last episode we're on together where I was whining and complaining about why can't we get a health update on Erod, he's back. Lo and behold, he's back.
Right.
So Erod had an absolutely blistering start to the season. He played 37 games at AA. Then he missed a ton of time with a finger injury. I think he re-aggravated this twice during various rehab assignments. And then when he was finally healthy, the Twins were like, F this. You're going straight to AAA. And he's been there 6 or 7 games so far. Numbers on the season, and this is a couple of days old at this point for all these guys, but 276, 462 on base percentage, which is just like wild stuff. 572 slug, 1.034 OPS. He's striking out 29.2% of the time. That is sky high. He's walking 25% of the time. That is otherworldly. Contact percentage 66. That is pretty low. Chase percentage that he's running at St. Paul at the moment is 7%. That would be, if he was qualified, the best at AAA by like 9%. 27% end zone whiff. So like there is bat to ball stuff here, y'all. Expected WOBA 431. So let's ease into Erod. What do you make of the aggressive move to AAA when he finally got back and got healthy? The right call in your opinion?
Yeah, because I think the plan all along was to get him to AAA. I thought he'd make his major league debut this year. I thought he would be the guy like Keaschall and the other things that we've seen jogged out. If he's healthy, he's the guy when there's a need. And the problem was is that he hadn't played, was injured, re-aggravated things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that not surprised at all. Glad they did it.
Okay, so I'm now going to ask you a much more difficult and challenging question after teeing you up with that easy one, because I saw you reacting to his numbers kind of live, right? And it's literally like your face is going from like smile to frown as we go down each thing. What do you make of like the bat to ball numbers, contact and end zone whiff are very low and very high respectively? He strikes out an absolute ton. But then you offset that with like a walk rate of 25% is insane. And he's in the very, very upper echelon, upper tier of batted ball and exit velos. Like we're talking like close to Aaron Judge territory. So how do you make sense of that? Is it going to be a mess at the major league level? Do you think he's going to dominate at the major league level? You're shaking your head. I'm really curious what your thoughts are here. What are your concerns? Because I'm picking up concern vibes from you.
It's going to take him a long time. Like he's going to need all of the, what do they say, 1,500 at bats or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Why did Honeycutt drop in the draft? Like what was the major red flag with him?
Bat to ball skills.
And what were people so concerned about? Like, what stat were people like, whoa, we got a problem here? His in zone whiff was extremely high, and it's not even as high as Erod's. Like, it was 23%, right? 23% was alarming. He's at 27, and he's not. I think he's a good defender. He's not a guy that you can just stick out in the outfield and bat him ninth.
Oh.
I mean, you could, but he's not giving you that sort of value. Like, there's ceiling, and it's high, and then there's floor, and it's like,
yeah,
this could be a disaster.
So a couple of things, I should have caveated this before I reeled off his numbers because it's a little unfair, right? So some of the advanced stuff here, the contact, not the contact percentage, but the end zone whiff and the chase are both only based on his AAA starts so far. And so my wondering, right, with the end zone whiff, maybe that goes down a little. Either way, I think you're looking at like a high variance hitter. I think you're potentially looking at a lot of backwards Ks. Someone asked a really interesting question on Twitter, and I still haven't found a satisfactory answer, and I think I might actually write something at Twins Daily about it. And essentially they said this: is it right or wrong to worry that Erod is going to struggle in the same way that Eddie Julien has struggled? Which is to say, potentially has an elite eye, which we know Erod does. Really high strikeout rate, pardon me, and some bat to ball concerns. That's all true for Julien as well. And I haven't dug into it much yet, but I do think there are kind of potentially two things that really separate Emmanuel Rodriguez from Edouard Julien in terms of caliber of prospect. But I'm curious whether you see any similarities there between those two guys and whether that feels like a legit concern.
Yeah, I think approach-wise, they're probably very much the same. But Erod's playing in the middle of the field as a above-average defender, with a good arm, could play a bat that could play in the corners. Julien is at second and costing them games with his defense.
Yep.
And so I think they're both going to have value in their bat at their best, and there's going to be stretches where it's like, oh boy, it's him again. When you're hoping that someone comes up that can at least hit, and he's gonna swing out of his shoes when he needs to not swing out of his shoes, and he's gonna not swing at the ball when he needs to swing at the ball, and he's gonna be very polarizing because he's gonna do some things. But in his defense, he's in an organization that seems to care very, very little if you strike out.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fair, easy comparison to make, because I think when he stands in the batter's box, you're going to be like, oh, same approach. Oh, watch another. Like, the stuff that you teach little league kids not to do are things that you see Eddie Julien do, and the things that you'll see Erod do. And it's going to be super frustrating.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah. So I'm actually frantically trying to pull some of Eddie Julien's numbers up real quick while we're talking, but I do think quickly there are a couple of differences that I will point to that I think give me more confidence that Erod is going to be more consistently successful. The one, the first one that I will point to here is chase. Eddie Julien doesn't chase, but like Erod really, really doesn't chase. And I think he's going to walk close to 100 times a season. And if you are that prolific of a walker, you're going to accrue value that way. I also think there is night and day difference between the two in terms of how hard they hit the ball.
Sure.
Erod has like absolutely upper echelon power. And so that's going to matter a lot. And we'll talk more about that when we get to Brooks Lee. I cannot wait for Erod's major league debut because I want to see his swing data, how long his swing is, how fast his bat speed is. It's going to be really interesting. But I forget, apologies, I forget the name of who asked that question. I thought it was a really interesting one. Definitely planning to dig into it more because I do think it's relevant. And to your point, I think we both agree that Erod is like a fairly high variance guy who's going to go through really cold streaks and then potentially like otherworldly heaters when he's really on. So before we get to this like ranking question, Erod, stock up, stock down, or stock neutral for you?
In a weird way, man, I can't say anything but neutral. And I was actually, and I shared this at the beginning of the year, I was really concerned that he was going to be like a big time stock down guy because he was going to move up and it was going to be obvious that he was going to strike out more. 29% is still pretty significant.
Yeah.
But I don't know. His stock is neutral. He's going to move up rankings because he wasn't bad enough to go down, but he did enough good stuff to still show up. So for me, neutral, if not down a little bit, but it's also not fair because he didn't play a whole bunch, and that's what makes it hard. And I do like that he's at AAA, and that's where he'll start next year, and he's going to be one call away, and I think he's going to get an opportunity early because there's going to just be a need. Yep. And if he can come up and get it done, there's going to be no way you send him down.
100%.
But there's also going to be a week where you're just like, he's got to go.
Yep. Big picture wise, before we talk about their rankings, just like the fact that you're going to have Erod as prolific as he has been throughout the minor league levels in AAA in his age 22 season, and Walker Jenkins starting the season in AA in his age 20 season, it's hard to think of a higher ceiling, higher caliber outfield duo in all of baseball. And so that brings us to your question, which was, where are these guys ranked? And Cody Christie, friend and writer at Twins Daily, asked us a great question this week, which was, what is the possibility that the Twins have 2 top 5 consensus global prospects entering next season in Walker Jenkins and Emmanuel Rodriguez? Before you give your thoughts, Jeremy, current rankings, MLB Pipeline has Walker Jenkins at number 2 behind Dylan Cruz. I do not think that Cruz is graduating rookie status before the end of the season. And they have Erod at number 19. It was a fairly big jump for him at Pipeline. And then over at Baseball America, Walker Jenkins currently number 6 behind Roman Anthony, Jackson Jobe, Dylan Cruz, Chase Dolander, and Yason Dominguez. And then they have Erod at 14. So chances the Twins have 2 top 5 guys next season. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance. I don't, and not because I don't think either of them have the ability. I think Walker Jenkins will obviously be top 5. Pipeline has him 2. Dylan Cruz is in the major leagues right now, and so he's not going to graduate. But if he were, he would be number 1 by default.
Yep.
Erod is just, if he performs well enough to move up, he's going to be in the majors.
Yeah. Yep.
And if he doesn't perform well enough to move up, so I mean, you might get if he comes out on an absolute bender, and someone redoes their rankings in the first 3 months, there's the off chance,
which Pipeline famously does not do.
No. So it's like, I don't think the timing, it's not going to happen. Yeah. It's not going to happen this offseason.
I think it's a timing issue, right? Because if we rewind to the beginning of the season and played out this scenario, Erod is healthy all year and he goes on an absolute tear. He continues his torrid start from AA. Then maybe there's a world where I can see him jumping high enough to at least be in like the top 10, maybe even like top 8 but it's just hard, as you alluded to earlier, to leapfrog so many guys because the way that a lot of industry outlets have it, and particularly I think Pipeline leans on this, is when guys graduate, they're just going to shuffle everybody up as opposed to doing kind of a thoughtful re-rank, which I do know that Baseball America did. So, okay. That's Erod. Exciting to have him back. Let's move on to Brooks Lee. Brooks Lee started the season on the IL with a herniated disc in his back. He spent the offseason working on his right-handed swing, came back in rehab, was crushing a AAA, particularly from the right side as a right-handed hitter, getting to a lot of impact. Got promoted, got off to a good start, hit the injured list again with, I want to say, shoulder tendonitis, and now looks rough. I mean, really bad. Again, these are numbers from a couple of days ago. I didn't really dig into the advanced stuff here, but hitting 228, 275, 323. It's an OPS under 600. A lot of weak contact. And I have, since writing this rundown, done a ton of research into Brooks Lee's season and what he's doing and what the struggles are. But I'm curious for your take here, Jeremy. Do you think he's hurt still? Is he just worn down? Is he not as good a hitter as we thought because he was a kind of consensus global top 35-ish guy coming in? Is it too long of a grind this season? What are your thoughts on what you've seen from Brooks Lee, aside from all the interruptions and injuries?
So I think that the big thing with him that you have to remember is this is the first time he's played ball all year, right? He played at Cal Poly, was drafted, was dinged up to start the year. I think he missed some time last year. He was hurt, like his shoulder, and we've seen with Miranda what a shoulder injury can do.
This is true.
So I think there's something to be said about him being dinged up. There's absolutely something to be said about being worn down. Brooks Lee is not, when you look at him versus like a Byron Buxton or a Royce Lewis, he's not the super athletic build, right? Where it's just like he's going to wait. He's got, he can probably wake up and play baseball every day. But you just see body types and how guys look and how guys move. He's hit the wall. And so I think he was kind of thrust into action earlier than maybe the Twins wanted it to happen. I think he was certainly in the plans. But if Correa's back, he's not playing every day. If Royce Lewis is not 0 for 22, I think there's a lot of factors that lead to, Royce Lewis has to be on this team right now. But when Correa's back and Kepler's back and Buxton's back, there's going to be a pinch, and he doesn't really provide any extra value to be a pinch runner, to be a defensive replacement. I think long term he's certainly in the plans because he's a very good baseball player. He's just hit that wall, and it has to be in the lineup right now because of where the Twins sit with so many injuries.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. And I do want to come back to kind of the pre-draft profile, because we remember, right, that I want to say the Twins took him 8th. They were thrilled to get him there. But there are a number of guys taken ahead of and taken around him. But the kind of consensus on Lee was we're looking at a really strong value everyday player here. Someone who's going to live in the 2 to 3 F-WAR range per year, not necessarily like a superstar guy. Maybe have some outstanding years. There's a couple of nuggets about Lee that I'll share without digging too much into what I'm about to drop at Twins Daily, but 2 things. One is, do we actually know what kind of a hitter Brooks Lee is? Because he's always been talked about as this high contact, good bat to ball skills hitter, a very hitterish guy, right? With a great approach and this and that and the next thing. His approach has been terrible pretty much since he got to the majors. Brooks Lee is chasing at around a 35% rate, and it's everywhere. He's chasing to every compass point, and he's just giving up too much to hitters in their plan of attack for him. And I think one of the beat writers tweeted out this evening that he alluded to his approach being poor. The other thing that I found interesting is I hadn't dug much into Brooks Lee's swing data or swing data period, but he does not have a lot of bat speed. It's 2-3 miles per hour below major league average. His swing is relatively short, which we might expect, but that just creates less margin for error, right? So if you're going to have less bat speed, like Luis Arraez, you better have your approach locked in. And in recent months, Lee has not. Has been ill-disciplined. He's been swinging more. He's been chasing more. And so I'll be curious for your take on stock up, stock down, or stock neutral. For me, it's stock down with the caveat that there's still a lot of reasons to be optimistic that he is a really valuable contributor and everyday player for the Twins. With a kind of caveat, right, that like Major League Baseball is hard and it's an adjustment. What's your take on the Brooks Lee stock?
Yeah, so I would also say down. But I mean, I'm looking, and I felt like it's been a long season for him. He's only played 71 total games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it feels like that's not right. It was 5 games of rehab in the FCL, 5 games of rehab for Fort Myers, 25 games of rehab where he actually hit 308.
He was crushing at AAA, crushing
for 25 games, and then moved up, and then was hurt. So 36 games with the Twins. I don't. It's hard. I mean, he's still only 23, and he started the year with a back injury. There's some shoulder stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's had a history of lower body stuff.
Oh.
Like, I feel like there's more to it here. But I still view him favorably, that he's going to be an everyday
100%.
guy and probably third base.
Yep.
Right. And he's going to have to figure some things out. And the Twins have the ability, if they want to be pretty patient, because Miranda's an option at third.
Mm-hmm.
He's an option at third. Lewis is an option at third. Correa, if he's healthy, is going to be the shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
You have Willie Castro, who can just kind of play wherever. You have other options at second. You have options, and then potentially you have if you need to move Brooks Lee to first. I'm gonna view him as likely to be a Twin to start the year, but if he has to go back to AAA and get it done, there's no harm in that at 24 years old.
100%. 100% agree. Okay, let's move on to what are we on? Fourth guy. And I pulled these in order from Baseball America's rankings just for convenience. So if you don't like him, that's where to direct your ire. That's going to be infielder Luke Keaschall. Quick summary of his season. He started the season at High A, played 44 games, was promoted to Double A, played 58 games there. Just was like really a consistent offensive profile for Keaschall. There were definitely questions about his defensive home. Turned out that he couldn't throw. And the reason he couldn't throw was he needed Tommy John surgery. So it sounds like the team and Keaschall agreed on a timeline that would allow him to be back for the beginning of the 2025 season. Combined numbers across High A and Double A, he had 303, 420, 483. That's good for a 903 OPS. Struck out just over 17% of the time, walked a very healthy 13.5% of the time. Really good bat to ball skills, 81% contact rate. Don't have the end zone whiff or chase numbers for Keaschall, but a 393 expected WOBA on the season. Jeremy, what do you make of the Twins and Keaschall's approach to Tommy John surgery and getting that lined up for the beginning of 2025? It kind of connected a lot of dots of me around his defensive positioning over the course of the season.
Yeah, I think the Twins handled it as well as they could, and Luke Keaschall did everything that he could to put himself in a position to be on the radar. Mm-hmm. Aside from that injury, nothing could have gone better from his prospect, viewpoint. Does he start next year at AA? Does he start next year at AAA? Where do they view him defensively? Because I feel like it's in the infield, right?
And so I'm so glad you brought this up because it's basically my next question anyway, right? And so I don't know, like he's played 60 games at AA basically at this point, and those numbers combined across two levels, 903 OPS. He hasn't really slowed down since he got there. And so I think you could make an argument. Let's say they're conservative. You can go to AA for a month to get back on your feet. And if you're hitting well, you're up to AAA by late May, let's say. If that's the case, he's played himself into contention, as you said, for 2025. But where are you going to play this guy? Because he was drafted as an infielder. And I remember Sean Johnson commenting, we see him as someone who can stick on the dirt somewhere. Well, where are you going to play him on the dirt? Jose Miranda, Brooks Lee, Carlos Correa, Eddie Julian, maybe. There's so many guys there. Outfield, he's played a little center field. I don't think it's a great arm, but I also don't think it's fair to judge the arm given that he needed Tommy John surgery this season. And so I'm really curious to see where he plays defense and where he can kind of force his way into the lineup, because I don't know that it's like the power for him is enough of a carrying tool that he can just kind of play anywhere. You'd like him to be providing some kind of defensive value for you, but I'm just really not sure where that's going to be.
So isn't he just going to be what Willie Castro is?
But Willie Castro's coming back too. Or are you going to make him an outfielder on a more permanent basis, perhaps?
Well, I think Rocco loves having guys like that. The Twins don't have enough right-handed bats in general.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves, if he can rotate through the DH spot, like with all of his guys, it's like, well, who's going to DH today? Oh, Keaschall can play there.
Yep.
Right. And it almost becomes now you have a guy that you have Castro, who if someone's out long term, he just kind of goes there. And then you have Keaschall, who can just be, find a spot for sure against lefties. But in most sense, like, we need a guy for a day so Royce can get off his legs. He'll play third. You need a guy at first because, and he and then if he settles into a spot or is really good or really bad, dude just turned 22. So I think they'll probably go easy on him because of his arm. Like I would guess it's a ton of second base and left field.
Yep. I think that's fair.
And if he ends up kind of like in a platoon thing in left field with Larnach, if Larnach's back, ends up in a platoon type deal at second base with Julian if Julian's there. Like I just feel like there's a lot of options, but it's going to be go to AAA to start the year, hit your way up to the majors, and find a spot. We've talked a ton, and maybe not always on here, but it's like, oh, what are they going to do when everybody's healthy?
Yeah.
And it's never freaking mattered.
Yeah, the stupidest question of all time.
So they got 16 offensive players for 13 spots or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a problem. And the thing is, when you have guys like Keaschall and Lee and younger guys that have options, it's just like, I'll send them down and we'll go from there. So he's certainly in the conversation. I could see him, if he comes out next year and is doing what he did this year, that he just climbs these rankings, because what's not to like about him right now?
Yep. Maybe this is rhetorical at this point, given how you've spoken about him, but Luke Keaschall, stock up, stock down, or stock neutral for you based on his 2024 season?
I mean, he went from top 15-ish in the organization to top 50-ish in baseball.
Globally.
So
yeah.
I would say super, super big up arrow.
Yep. If you want to know the reason that the Twins farm system has shot up rankings from like the late teens or mid-teens to like top 5, it's Luke Keaschall and it's Zebby Matthews. It's the guys who weren't anywhere in the discussion who are now global top 100 prospects. It's not the guys like Walker Jenkins who started at 30 and is now 2 or 5 or 6 or whatever.
100%.
Okay, 2 more, Jeremy, then we'll call it a day. We're going to finish with pitchers. Fifth guy we're going to talk about today is Zebby Matthews, who has struggled significantly in his fairly brief tenure in the majors, but I don't necessarily think that is surprising. Let's just recap his year for a second. Zebby Matthews started the year at High A Cedar Rapids. He started 4 games at Cedar Rapids, 9 starts at Wichita, 4 starts at St. Paul. Along the way, his fastball got up to 98 when he was at AA. Just an absolutely meteoric rise. Some big blow-ups since he was promoted to the majors. And I pulled these numbers before his start tonight. I know it was on a pretty short hook tonight, but 22 innings pitched, 32 hits given up, 18 earned runs, 22 Ks, and just 3 walks. So I guess first question, Jeremy, for you, kind of big picture-wise, did the struggles concern you, other than the fact that the Twins need to win games to try and get in the playoffs? What do you make of his debut, his start?
Doesn't concern me at all.
Agreed.
I mean, his first strikeout was Bobby Witt.
Yeah.
He struck out 20 after tonight, 27 and 25 in the third. So he's striking out over 9. And he's doing that. And you've talked about, command versus control. He's only going to get better. He's going to command pitches better where he can work the borders of the strike zone. Yep. And right now it's like he's 2 in the zone. And so, I mean, when you look at Zebby Matthews and how he fits in this rotation, it's like we're calling up this guy that maybe wasn't in our plans, but is the best we have to be a back of the rotation guy. When you had the choice between him or Varland, you went with Zebby. Mm-hmm. That tells you what the Twins think. And I think long
right call too.
Absolutely. And it's like Pablo, you have to count on to be your number 1. Bailey Ober is certainly solidifying himself as a 2 or a 3.
A playoff caliber starter, fair?
Yes. And I think Zebby Matthews is going to be that guy too. Maybe not, obviously not this year, mm-hmm. and maybe not next year, but mm-hmm. I think Zebby Matthews' ceiling, and Joe Ryan was arguably the Twins' best starter when he got hurt. Mm-hmm. I think Zebby Matthews becomes like leapfrogs Joe Ryan here in the next couple of years.
Ooh, that's fun.
And is a legitimate playoff caliber starter.
So there's definitely certain things that work in your favor, and I have a lot of thoughts on this, but some things that work in your favor, like the velo's there, mm-hmm. the pitch mix is there, he throws 5, the frame is there, like he's a big, sturdy dude. Mm-hmm. He's a great mover. Obviously, he's gotten up to 98 miles per hour this year. You talked about the command versus control thing. We've talked about that ad nauseum. I don't want to dig into it again. I think the high level thing is at the moment, he commands the fastball and the slider really well. Everything else is catching too much of the zone, and the scouting report is out, right? Like swing when you see something in the zone is doing damage. Mm-hmm. There is nothing, in my opinion, that will be better for Zebby Matthews and David Festa than the ups and downs and the undulations that they're going through trying to adjust to being major league starters right now for their long-term development. Like, I love this period of struggle for him because he said it himself. I think it was after that nightmare start where I was so impressed with, just how he kind of handled himself. He said, I have a lot to learn. That's exactly what you want to hear from your talented young starting pitcher who can throw 98, has 5 pitches, who's just got absolutely blown up, right? All of this is a learning curve, an adjustment, and clearly there's work to do here, but I think we're both on the same page, and you can correct me if I'm off base. We are both pretty confident that Zebby is a pillar of this rotation for the next 5-6 years for the Twins.
100%. And I think the one thing that I would add to that is he's doing that with David Festa alongside him. Like they're doing this together, and there's strong leadership in that clubhouse where sometimes it's really hard for that young pitcher to adjust to things like this. And Carlos Correa is not going to let that happen. And Kyle Farmer's not going to let that happen. And Pablo Lopez is going to let that happen. And so I think that the two of them experiencing this together is really good for both of them. And as much as Zebby Matthews is a pillar, so is the next guy we're going to talk about.
Yep. And the last thing I'll say on Zebby, someone tweeted this and it just resonated with me tonight. Someone was like, Zebby Matthews is so close to being really good. Agreed. Give it a little more time. That's going to come. 17 starts at 3 levels before coming up to the majors, including only 4 at AAA. Let's keep the big picture in perspective here. Last guy we're going to talk about tonight, Jeremy, as you alluded to, David Festa, 15 starts in St. Paul. That's a perfect contrast to Zebby, right? 15 starts in St. Paul in 2024, then up to the majors, a brief demotion, and then he's been awesome since his second promotion to the majors, and this is including his start the other night that was not that great. So July 24th to current, here's the numbers. 41.1 innings pitched, 370 ERA, 330 FIP, 323 xFIP, striking out 31.8% of hitters, walking just 8.8%, giving up a 659 OPS against. What do you make of his performance in his kind of second stint? What do you think the ceiling is here for Festa, based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what Matthews offers. Different body type, obviously. I think he's going to struggle a little bit. Well, I guess Matthews too with giving up home runs. Zebby's not going to walk guys. I think Festa's going to walk guys. But yeah, he has been really good. I mean, he had a 9 strikeout game in August, and the ERA. I mean, I know that's an older stat, over 5. FIP is right around 4, and I mentioned that Zebby's over 9 for strikeouts per 9. Festa's over 10, and so if these are your back of rotation guys next year, that's not bad at all. I mean, I think you've got options, and it was kind of baptism by fire here, but there's no way that any of us would have been like, because what's he at, 51 innings with the Twins, like, hey, when we turn the page to the end of June, we're going to count on David Festa. If you'd have told us that in April, we'd have been like,
yeah,
this is not a playoff team. And if you watch the last couple of weeks, which fortunately I didn't have to, this wasn't a playoff team. But then you watch tonight, and it's like Zebby, quick hook, get through, offense creates a spark. Like, David Festa is not going to start a playoff game this year for the Twins, but David Festa is going to come in and
be nasty out the bullpen.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. Like, and that was, I've just kind of listed the 5, right, with Pablo and Ober and Ryan and Matthews and
SWR.
And I didn't talk about the guy who's been one of the most consistent. I mean, he's takes the ball every 5 days, and so that it's for the long term. The Twins are in pretty good shape because these guys have answered the bell, and it hasn't always been super pretty. But man, if you look at those game logs, and it's like, yeah, Festa gave up 6 home runs before the calendar turned to August, and only 3 cents. He's exceeded my expectations for him. I know that you were very much a believer.
I'm gonna be smug now.
And you should be, because I was worried. I mean, I did call him Cy Festa at one point.
We love to see it.
he's been everything you could ask for.
I missed stock for Zebby, so we'll go back and do his. Zebby, stock up, stock down, stock neutral.
Way up.
Way up. Anyone who says stock down for Zebby because he's struggling right now, adjusting to the major leagues, get it together. David Festa, stock up, stock down, stock neutral.
Not as way up as Zebby, but close.
Yep, agreed. 100%. The one last thing I want to say on these young pitching guys is this. Just think back on any Twins pitcher who you care to kind of marinate on or think about in the recent past, or even someone who's in the rotation now, and think about their journey to the point that they got to. Take Jose Barrios. Do you remember how bad Jose Barrios was when he first came up? He was getting absolutely shelled. Or Bailey Ober, who you alluded to, right, has now kind of cemented himself as a guy who he really looks almost every start like he can go 7 and give up 3 or less and, strike out 7, 8, 9 guys. It's taken Bailey Ober how many years in the majors to get to that point of looking really, really great?
And without pitching in the minors for
right. And so can we just pump the brakes a little bit? I know everyone wants the Twins to get to the playoffs and everyone wants them to play better at the moment, but this is going to be an adjustment curve, and it's going to be an adjustment curve of years, not 2 or 3 starts or 4 or 5 or 6 months. We got to wait till like 2026 to know exactly what Zebby Matthews and David Festa can be as MLB starters. Anything else, Jeremy, you got on any of those top 6 guys we talked about?
I don't think so. I mean, as a whole, like you said, the reason that the system has been stock up is not the top guys, but those middle guys and some guys we'll talk about. You didn't mention Andrew Morris. It's been sometimes as a prospect follower, and I'll admit I did it less this year than most years, but it's like you can just feel the air coming out when guys are getting hurt and guys are struggling, and it's pretty uncommon. I mean, there were the handful of injuries, but it's pretty uncommon to see what Keaschall did, what Matthews did, what Festa did. I mean, that is, if you followed it this year for the first year and you're like, oh, this is normal,
you've been spoiled.
This is not normal at all. And so it's been pretty neat. And I think, to think it's going to happen again next year is probably just not realistic. But yeah, it's been a great minor league season for the Twins as an organization. Even if they're not going to get, I don't know where all the teams sit in the standings, and they were winning titles a couple years ago. But from an individual perspective, they're putting themselves in really good shape for the parent club to be really good.
And that's funny that you mentioned that, and we don't have time to talk about it now, but from a team perspective, it was not actually a very good season for the Twins minor league affiliates. I don't think anyone made the playoffs this year. Fort Myers needed to win 3 of their last 5, and I think they lost 4 out of 5, which is super unusual for the Twins. I think the Cedar Rapids Colonels missed the playoffs for the first time in 11 seasons. But real quick, Jeremy, before we go, some Minnesota Twins breaking news. Minnesota Twins will activate Byron Buxton from the injured list on Friday, optioning Austin Martin to AAA St. Paul to make room on the roster. Your 30-second reaction: Buxton is back as of Friday.
Buxton up. Great. That'll be fun. Martin down.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, Kersey's just going to be up then?
Defensive replacement, pinch runner. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, but Austin Martin would be a better pinch runner.
No, Kersey's way faster, I think. He's like 30-plus feet per second.
Okay, fair. I thought Austin Martin had been playing well when he was playing and has been fine in center. I'd play Castro at center over him Kearsey going to play in the corners? Maybe then?
I think Kearsey will be
like the Andrew Stevenson of this year.
I think he'll just be spelling Buxton for days off, and that's it. Or pinch running, or I'm not sure. Well,
I mean, when you have a 28-man roster, I get having a guy just to pinch run.
Yeah,
and I made that argument years and years and years ago, but I don't know. That seems weird-ish, but I guess I'm not going to split hairs about it. Great that Buxton's healthy enough to do it. Now let's get Keaschall back. Let's get Kepler back. Let's play some target field playoff games.
So amen.
On that, yeah.
Amen. Last thing, I'm going to drop this before we go because we've been trying to make this happen for maybe like 2.5 months. And so maybe if I say it, we're going to will it into existence. We are going to continue this Twins farm system rundown, but not next week because next week we have a guest. We're going to be welcoming Shooter Hunt, the vice president of scouting from Prep Baseball, to the show. And specifically, we're going to talk about all things high school baseball. So we're going to dig into scouting prep hitters, scouting prep pitchers, talk a little bit about the 2024 draft cycle, get his thoughts on some of the guys that were taken, some of the guys who didn't sign. So it should be a really fun episode. Hoping to record that next Wednesday around the same time. Then we'll get back to the Twins farm system review. So that should be fun, dude. We've been trying to line that one up for a minute.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. And we will catch you next time. Until then, go Twins.